This podcast is for entertainment and storytelling purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice. Some topics may be sensitive. Please listen with care and seek support if needed. Welcome back to the Because She's Adopted podcast. I'm your host, Kristal Parke. If you're new here, this is the podcast where we blame everything on being adopted. Just kidding. Welcome, Marisol and Will. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us, Kristal. We've been looking forward to this.
We have too. As I was preparing for things today, I was preparing that it could be an emotional recording. So we're going to just start off with some questions that Stuart's going to ask the two of you just to get to know you a little bit more. So
first, where are you guys located? Where are you?
We are just outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So about central Pennsylvania, an hour and a half from Philadelphia.
Amish country.
Yes, horse and buggies are everywhere.
How long have you been married for?
10 years. We just had our 10-year anniversary this past August. So it's been 10 years. In a lot of ways, it feels like, 20. And in other ways, it feels like 5,
Yeah, I hear you. In one word, Will, what was your first impression of Marisol?
Intriguing.
that's a good word. And what about you, Marisol?
I thought he was handsome.
Oh, you are handsome, Will.
Say that again. Sorry.
I said you are handsome.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to hear it twice. That's why
I know you heard it.
That's something you would do.
You wanted it twice.
Oh, thank you.
And which one of you is adopted?
Me, Marisol.
Will, do you remember the first time Marisol told you that she was adopted?
All right. I do. And she's going to be so excited that we're talking about this. So I like to think of myself normally as pretty with it, So we were in college. That's where we met. We met we both have math degrees. So we met in a class called Ordinary Differential Equations. And she happened to be roommates with my best friend's friends. And so I was over her apartment and, we were starting to get to know each other otherwise. And we were having a personal conversation. And my stupid self said, because her maiden name was Howard, right? So her name is Marisol Howard. And I looked at her and I said, so why are you so tan? Which was about the dumbest thing I could have asked at the moment. But I think I was crushing pretty hard, so my mind was just elsewhere. But then she explained to me that she was adopted through all that. Very gracious of her.
That is a great story.
Yeah, well, and that's probably what made her so intriguing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
Prior to meeting Marisol, what were your thoughts about adoption?
Oh, I can't say I ever had any. I mean, I'm a 90s kid, and the only conversations about adoption or only thing you would ever hear about adoption is kids picking on each other, trying to poke fun and say, well, you're adopted anyway. And I think probably my older brother, when he was just trying to, get a jab at me, would say, well, you're adopted anyway. So I only ever experienced it in the context of like, quote unquote, playground bullying.
I think we hear about that, Marisol, probably within our community too, right? Like, or there's still videos out there of people, telling people that they're adopted and making a joke out of it. And I feel so far away and far removed from that now. But as you say it, it's like, oh yeah, I do remember that happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
My brother did, in fact, as well tell me that I was adopted and made a negative. So the bullying and stuff like that. So
Your brother did?
Yeah, I mean, joking around, I knew that I wasn't.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So, Will, how over the years, now that you've been married for 10 years, has your view on adoption changed?
Significantly. For the first part of our relationship and marriage, I obviously had known from that moment of that conversation that my wife was adopted. But I think myself and to an extent her didn't realize all of the ways that her adoption had affected, her, in her identity and how she handled certain, difficulties of life or just frankly, the way she saw the world. And, for me, the same thing. I'm sure there were things going on inside of her where she knew these things about herself, but early on they didn't really come up much. And I'll let her explain what personally kind of was the trigger for this journey of just processing her adoption. But I suspect it has to do with the first of all motherhood and parenthood, and then secondly just all of the grief and loss that we've experienced over the years. It's very complex, and I think it probably triggered that. So for me, I got pulled into this with her, and I'm grateful for it. For one, she's my wife and I love her dearly, so something so significant like this, you're going to be along for the ride with her. But yeah, it was somewhere that I never expected we would go, just because it wasn't something that I routinely thought about, because I just don't have much of an experience in it.
Marisol, if you can just share a little bit of your adoption story with us so we get some backstory on you.
Yeah, sure. So I was adopted around 3 months old. I was born in Bogota, Colombia. My mother had some issues as far as pregnancy and just being at risk for just really intense complications. And so before I was adopted, they had lost a son, and he was born prematurely, and he, did not survive. So I actually just found out this past summer after talking to some relatives that my mom, my adoptive mom, so I'll just say mom, she not only lost his name, they named him Zachary. She not only lost him, but I learned that she was in a coma for 3 weeks. And my father, he had to, make the decision, probably alongside with family and things like that, supporting him to um, give a proper goodbye to their son and kind of just move on a little bit with that before, obviously she woke up and she came out of that coma for 3 weeks. But back to, my adoption is that I was then raised as an only child. And I, as far as our background, we were in New Jersey. We were in a rural town outside of Philadelphia, but still pretty isolated as far as diversity goes for, a transracial adoptee. So my high school was predominantly white. I knew one other adopted kid or friend. She was a friend of mine. She was adopted from South Korea. And we didn't really talk about it much, but we just kind of saw each other and, you know, hung out and were typical high schoolers. And yeah, growing up, my mom and I, for the majority of my upbringing, we were really involved in church. And my mom, organized all kinds of things. And all that to say is, I grew up, at least around here in Lancaster County, the typical question is, were you raised in a Christian home? And so that's a complicated question for me, but it's a go-to question just as you're making friends in Lancaster. It's a very spiritual community. So my answer as far as a spiritual background, which is important to me, is, we grew up going to church. And I would say that my father, most of the time, would stay home. And he was kind of going through his own struggles. And so being raised by a couple who were pulled in different directions was always a bit confusing for me. And so I had stability in pockets of my life for the majority of my life. And then obviously, hitting those pivotal years of elementary school and, secondary education, you develop your own sense of where do I belong? Like, how do I fit in? And so that turning point for me, I relied heavily on just trying to fit in like any typical high schooler. But even more so, I think I kind of pulled away from that spiritual sense a little bit. And so, as far as an upbringing like that, it was, coming and going of the spiritual component that my mom provided, and just having this like unsteady tone in the house with my father, doing things his way for the most part, and then my mom being heavily immersed in something was kind of odd. They were loving to me, and so I was really close with my mom, and I'll talk about that maybe a little bit more as we move on, but she was like my best friend, and she always was able to listen to even just some of the words I had for the complications I think, looking back, stemmed from relinquishment and adoption. But I couldn't articulate that. But she was one who definitely had an open space, and she didn't offer ways to fix it, honestly. She just sat with me. And so I really value that part of it. And not to say my dad didn't or wasn't available to do the same things as she, but I do think that she had this incredible gift of empathy and being able to just sit with someone like her adopted daughter who's going through all of these identity struggles, self-esteem, and all of that. So for the most part, those parts of childhood were pretty warm. Obviously, in a rural area, I lacked any kind of mirroring, so that was difficult, but
I'm really happy for you that that she was able to give that to you. I can see like you have a real peace about that. That's amazing. I
yes.
love that.
Yes, it was as I've been immersed in the adoptee community, I I really hold that tightly, and it does at the same time, I have a deep sadness for adoptees who had adoptive mothers who didn't offer that or couldn't offer that, and so there's always like a bittersweetness about it when I'm in conversation, but I will say that it was something really incredible. Looking back at the time, I didn't know it. I probably somewhere wanted her to fix it when I would come home and say like, "Why am I different?" And like, "Why do I look different?" Or "My hair is thick and wavy, like I want blonde hair, that's not that." But she just was open. She was so open and selfless.
I love that.
Going from probably high school and then into college years, I definitely longed for being a part of something or being a part of a group, longed for that type of connection. So, towards like the end of high school, I definitely got into just the social crowd that was ready for a good time and partying and just wanted to have the escape, but also feel like I could, connect with people who were different than me. And so going into that, I had a relationship with someone for 4 years. So basically all 4 years of college. And so when I look back at that, I could see things now that were qualities that just held me back from any kind of healthy relationship with someone, like people pleasing. And I can't articulate it super well, but just kind of in an unhealthy way, submitting to whatever that person like wanted, or his ideas, who he was, just kind of in that chameleon mode that most adoptees talk about, conforming to his family. And it hit personally too, because my father passed away my first year of college. So I was 18. He was diagnosed with lung cancer my freshman year. I think it was September. And so I was away at school. I kind of was able to suppress a little bit of the feelings of my father being sick because I was away, and I just wanted to socialize and I just wanted to make friends, and I kind of want to deny any kind of possible loss. So looking back too, I felt a little dissociated, but he ended up passing away April, so that spring semester of freshman year. The person I was dating at the time and his family were really close, and could, as you can imagine, walked closely with my mom as a widow, helping her with things. At the same time, I met Will probably 2 years later, 2.5 years later. Yeah. And I was dating that person. And it was just interesting because I knew that that relationship was kind of at a stalemate. And so, but it was just comfortable. And I think looking back too, that it was pretty terrifying to think of being severed from that person, or even just the idea of that person, because there were definitely qualities where I knew that we just weren't compatible, but it was almost like a security blanket because I had suffered a great loss of my adoptive father, and my mom and his parents and relatives were in each other's lives. And so before even dating Will, and obviously with our friendship, that was kind of the context when we dated, or I'm sorry, when we met. And that definitely set the stage for more things to come as far as how we got together eventually and things like that.
Do you want to get into that? How the two of you did get
Sure.
together?
In 2010, fall of 2010, we met in math class. And like I said, I was dating that person for a couple years at that point. And so Will and I were just friends. Like, we had such a good time together, and we loved hockey. Well, we love hockey. Um, and we're Flyers fans. Sorry, Stewart. And and yeah, we had that common thing, and so we would just hang out, whether it was studying for our exam, and that was always a riot because Will was a physics, and then at that time probably a soon to be math major, and for me, I was studying so that I could just teach algebra. I did not honestly care about ordinary differential equations. I just wanted to pass the test, move on, get in the classroom. And he would just when we're studying, just really deeply ponder all the theorems. And I would just look at him like, I don't care about that. Can you show me how to do this? I just want to pass. And so it was just funny, our different personalities and wonderings and how we process. And getting just into, deeper conversations about our childhood, our upbringing. Obviously he found out I was adopted. I don't think I talked about that a lot, but we definitely talked about how my father passed away. We talked about religion. And so, yeah, we became friends. And then it was May of 2012. I actually found a middle school math teaching position. And so I moved in with my mom right after graduating. And we were like roommates because she had moved out of my childhood home and she was in like this 55 and older community. So it was like they like let her into the club. She was a little bit on the younger side still. And I was figuring out my first teaching job, and it was close by. And um she was working like she typically would. And so she had some health complications as well. She had Raynaud's disease. And then in 2008, she got diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension and then scleroderma. They go hand in hand. Basically, there was lung issues. And so she was always on medication and things, but just living her life. And in May, around Mother's Day, she was hospitalized. She had a lot of swelling. And so she also just didn't feel right. I think she felt like dizzy and things like that. And so she was in the hospital for a little bit. She recovered. They didn't really find anything going on specifically. So they discharged her because her swelling went down. And I imagine she said she was feeling better and her vitals were okay. So we went to Ocean City, New Jersey, had Mother's Day, and then it was, I believe, that Tuesday. So middle of May on a Tuesday, it was just typical working day. She said she wasn't feeling great. We had some church event, and so she stayed back, which is very unlike her to skip out on something. And so the next day, she had a seminar. She was an office manager for an allergist, and that was her first and only job. And she left the seminar early, and that's very not like her. And so I checked in with her, I think at the end of the school day, and I had a meeting, and she said she still wasn't feeling good. And so I said, I think you should probably call your pulmonologist. She assured me, okay, I will, because at first it was kind of, she wanted to shrug it off, I think. Later that evening, we always had this little like women's Bible study just at like someone's home. My mom, after the meeting that I had at school, I checked on her. She was in bed, which again is very not the usual for her. And so she told me, I'm not going to go. And I remember feeling like I was probably anticipating um something intense, because I remember just shutting down and being like angry And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to Bible study. I'll be back in a little bit. I'm running late. And it was just, I think I was kind of trying to soothe myself with, let's just move on to the next thing. Went to Bible study, it was probably 2 hours later. And I was dropping a friend off back at her house. Her name was Mildred, and she's a nurse. And, I had shared, like, my mom's not feeling great because they all asked, where is she? And I get a call. I'm sitting in my friend's driveway. We're about to say bye. I get a call from my mom, and I could tell that she was really soft spoken. And she was saying that she wasn't feeling good. And she was saying that, I called, she was dating someone at the time. His name was Kevin. And she said, I called Kevin, and I think you need to come home, and I think he's going to come too. And she was saying, I love you. And it slowly faded. And then there was nothing. And so I'm looking at my friend Mildred, and she's looking at me, and she's basically, got out of the car. She asked if, we should call an ambulance. And I thought, well, let me just run home. Let me just see what's going on. And so it's probably a 10-minute drive. It felt like 45 minutes, probably an hour. It felt like a lifetime. And so I am speeding through all of these back roads in southern New Jersey. And it's dark out right at the time. It was like 9 o'clock or so. And I am just going around these curves of this development of this 55 and older community. And I go into the driveway. I think I leave my door opened because I'm just rushing to get to her. And she was on the couch. She was unconscious. And I remember just feeling like my world is shattered. I felt like I I lost her. Like I lost her, and I just looked at her, and it was just no sign of life at that moment. And then it's just, that outer body experience that you have is um something I think when people endure loss, you just get, because there's no way to describe it other than you are like looking down at yourself, and it's like something so precious just like fell off the edge of a cliff, and it is nowhere to be seen. They're so deep, and you just feel it all the way from, like, your heart just drops to your belly. So after after a lot of emotion on my part, I mean, I reacted firstly, not logically, and I just had this feeling of, oh my gosh, this is happening again, because obviously I lost my dad. And I was not around for my dad passing away. So, my mom, I was obviously there for. And I make some calls. I think I called my pastor. I think, obviously I called 911. I remember calling a few close relatives. One of them would have been my aunt, which is my mom's little sister and only sister. Um, just to say, the ambulance is coming, and I think this is it. I really, I called 911, and I, tried to hope for the best, but something in my heart knew you're going to say goodbye. And so, going to the hospital, at first you're kind of in this mode of survival. Like, you are just trying to piece together just getting to the hospital. You're trying to process what's happening. So we're in this ambulance, it's loud, and we finally pull up. I remember like walking through the hospital corridor there, and I think physically it hit me, and so I just got to my knees. I think I just collapsed in where those automatic doors are, and someone escorted me to kind of like a quiet room. And that night, I think a relative told me, after more people started showing up, that she did have a pulse. They tried to revive her, but there was just so much time that had passed for her to be unconscious that way, and you know, suffering from cardiac arrest so many times like that. It would have been really difficult to recover from, as far as the damage to the brain. And so she passed away, and there were so many people surrounding her, because just everyone called each other. I mean, there was people from our church, obviously people I had just seen at the Bible study. There were relatives, friends, like she grew up nearby, and um we just sang to her. I was by her side, and I'm just looking at her, my best friend, and thinking like, what am I going to do? And not to say my dad's passing was insignificant, but it was my mom, and it was someone that I called every day. And I know sometimes, when someone's in college, they, call their mom like every other day or something. I called my mom every day. I probably called her a couple times a day. And so I'm like looking at her like there there is no way that I can do this. I don't even know where to go from here. But the thing was that God had me, and he had me in his hands because a few months before her passing, I ended the relationship that I was in for 4 years because it just no good was coming from it. And so a few months before that, I had already lost heavily, very heavily, and I just was on my knees constantly because I felt like I lost a person. And so when I moved in with my mom, I was heavily grounded in um, coming back to God, the same God who saw me when I was growing up in my younger years, and the God who, I mentioned my dad had some struggles, and he did for the first, I would say, a little more than a decade of my life. He was an alcoholic, and I didn't even realize it. I just knew he had a lot of rage. And so, the same God who was with me watching my mom pass away was the same God who had been there when I was like 5 and just hiding because I didn't want to hear fighting anymore. And it was this crazy dark place, but I still could see light. And so that definitely, it's something that I have always held on to, and I firmly believe that there was that presence of the Lord like none other, because I I I don't know where I would be or what I would have um, even clung to if it wasn't for the God that saw me. And so it that definitely pops up in this whole journey as far as processing my adoption, but that was one of the most pivotal points in my life in being held in this terrible situation. It was an undeniable presence. And as we were singing to her, we sang Amazing Grace, and it was one of her favorite songs. And so as we were singing to her, it was this peace that was unspeakable, undeniable, but it was certainly present. So yes, that was a very major point of my life for Will as he like comes into this story. That had a very big impact on me, losing her, because I was just emotionally a wreck. But I also knew that I was going to be okay because I had this hope that had been with me since I was little. I'll let you speak on some of this because I think it's really unique in that the timing of our relationship was so all over the place because I was trying to heal from this deep wound of losing my mom, but also I knew I wanted to have like a clear mindset, something I did not have when I was dating the person before him. I knew that I loved Will and I knew that he loved me, but I knew that I also had a lot of healing to do. So there was this like tension of, oh my goodness, we're so into each other and there's so many complicated things, but we're just gonna have to be patient. That's kind of how we slowly, like, snail crawled our way to, like, a relationship. It was very slow.
How did Will come into the picture?
Like she said, it was slow. So I grew up in a, first generation American. My parents immigrated here. We're Palestinian, and over there, you're culturally one religion or another, right? Like typically Palestinians, 85 to 90% of the time are Muslim, and then 10 to 15% of the time are Christian, and you kind of everything about your family, from the name to the town you grow up in, for the most part, reflects the faith that your family follows. And so I say all that to say, um, my family is Christian, or would tell you that we're Palestinian Christians, right? But as I grew up, we never really practiced. We never read. We did, often didn't go to church. Those kinds of things. So it fell away. And my like interests and things, I'm a little bit of a science dweeb. So I got pretty heavily into like, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to study physics and math, and like the hard sciences. And that community typically, not all the time, but typically is a fairly secular, atheist or agnostic community. And so then you start getting around people, and other people's beliefs and things influence you. And so by the time I was 17, 18 years old, I would have told you I was a full-blown staunch atheist. And what Marisol alluded to but didn't say all of is, when I got to college, it was very much that. And not only in what I believed, but also like I'll just be frank with you. I thought people who believed otherwise, I thought, Christians and other, religions were just insane. And how could you believe such a thing when you like look at this world? It's so black and white. How could you believe this? That's something for, you know, um, people thousands of years ago who couldn't make sense of what they saw. And so then they said, well, it must be a God in the sky who's doing these things. And so like that was very much who I was. And so I met Marisol. I was attracted to her. I said intriguing, and I mean it. And I just figured it captured a couple things. I thought she was stunning. I thought she was intelligent, hilarious, just all these things. And, but she was very interesting. And I think the thing that, as we got to know each other, she was like, she described her growing up very well, but she had that like Christian background. Like she grew up in the church. She could speak it. She knew what she believed. And so I loved talking about what I believed, and I loved hearing what other people had to say about what they believe in it. But my intent was always like, no, 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 I'm going to get you to see it clearly. Right. So we got into a lot of conversations about, yeah, we got into a lot of conversations about God and about what she believes. And, this is funny. I didn't tell you this. I was going through old emails for some reason yesterday, and I came across, it was in 2011, I came across a chain of emails we were sending each other back and forth where I was sending her articles that were like, read this and you'll understand why you're wrong. And she would email me back, and she would straight up say, at one point she said, that was way over my head. Like, can we just talk about this? So, so anyway, it got to the point where, I realized like, I need to know more of what she believes. So I actually went out and I bought a Bible, and I started reading the Bible, and like, as an atheist, and that, caused me to like question, well, wait, why do I believe what I have believed for so long? And like, what is this in front of me right here? And all this hostility that I had just melted away. And so then I had to be like really honest with myself about like, who am I? Who is God? Like, what is all this? And so there was a lot of like, that was like a spark that was going to lead to significant growth. But like Marisol said, these things, when they're genuine, they take a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think we were both really attracted to each other. And I think I was ready to like go all in, and my wife in her wisdom was, and what was unfolding in her life with her, her mom being sick and passing away, and the loss that she'd already experienced and everything. She was really wise, and like, I think she wanted it as well. But like, for her, it was, if this is right and true and good and what's supposed to happen, like there's things that need to take place, or we need to go slow enough to process through some things so that it is genuine and it sticks. And, as far as the timeline goes, like, I knew her mom, a little bit, like we had conversations. I'd met her at like events that she would invite me to that her family was at and things like this. And I heard through the grapevine that her mom liked me a lot, so that's good.
It's true.
But
Sue liked you.
yeah. So, but then yeah, when she left this world, Marisol told me the next morning, and it was devastating to hear. And obviously I was there for everything to follow as far as viewings and funerals and all that. But Marisol and I drifted away. Trying to get the timeline right. I think it was after that. Yeah, we had drifted away after that, and actually I think it was just this, me and my immaturity, not really appreciating or recognizing why, as silly as it sounds, she wasn't ready to kind of move forward with me, and in the not in the immediate aftermath of her mom, but even like beyond that, although something like that just lasts, the impact lasts for so long. But anyway, we drifted apart for a while, and eventually what brought us back was her mom's mom had passed. I think I have this timing right.
Yeah.
And I just reached out in a text to, say, hey, I'm so sorry to hear about your Nana. And, then we had gotten to talking again. And I think by then, like, absent of my wife, I had continued to read and pray and ask myself the questions about what I believe. And it, I think in that sense, what she could see is, hey, he's not trying to believe what I believe so he can get the girl. Like, this is actually genuine, because we haven't been around each other in months, and he is still, on this journey. And so from there, it was around like the middle of 2013. We defined the relationship. We had a little.
I went to his graduation. Like, I went back to Millersville, where we, both went to school, and his parents were there. I sat next to his sister, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I think all these feelings are coming back. And I was thinking about this a couple days ago, because I did drag my feet with him. Obviously the timing made sense anyway. It's fine. But, thinking about like the fear of, I already lost a very significant relationship. I had lost my mom. I was just so afraid. And I just felt like I cannot do this again. So I'm just going to keep dragging my feet. I'm going to just kind of like have this absent-minded view of it. And then there was just something about obviously reconnecting, and then, being there for a pivotal time in his life, like graduating and becoming friends again, and then, dating. But I look back on that thinking like, man, I was so afraid of rejection to this extent where I subconsciously just pushed him away in some areas. And so the timing ended up working out, but it was just looking and thinking about my response to this love that he had for me.
I think Stewart can relate to.
Oh, I can completely relate to the push and pull. When we first started dating, and Kristal obviously scared, she just came out of another relationship as well that didn't end the greatest, and I came into her life. Yeah, I can relate to both of you so much. First, you, Marisol, on I could also don't care about differential equations. I've been hanging on to that one for a while.
Yeah.
But no, Will, I also, I grew up in a family where, we didn't go to church either. And my father was Catholic. I think my mom was,
I don't know what
I
your
don't really
mom
know what
was.
my mom was, but my
Yeah.
father was Catholic, but not that practicing or anything like that. And I don't know if I was an atheist, but I definitely did. I guess I did want to like prove people wrong. And I can remember meeting people, and we often talk about how my walk to Christianity and having faith was a lot of little God shots along the way. All these little people planted in my life, just kind of, sharing their stories and the message. And yeah, I would often try and prove them wrong. And then I met Kristal as well, who had a lot of the same upbringing that you had, Marisol. So
Yeah.
yeah.
If faith is what people choose, if God is what people choose, that has to be their own choice. And I think also recognizing like I wasn't responsible for his salvation, like that wasn't like whatever he chose to believe, that had to be for him and his own journey. Wow, you have a lot of patience. You have a lot of patience, both of you.
You should see her in our normal day to day. She is very patient with me.
And he
That's
was the same
awesome.
with me, especially in this adoption journey, which I would love for Will to like comment on, because this was,
Yeah.
you know, going back to like this space of processing, like deeply processing being
Mhm.
adopted in a sense where I didn't have like a cultural identity. I think I'm starting to slowly piece together one, but um it was really slow. And this is it I think it actually happened around like 2016 where things were just really tense in our country. And I've been trying to figure out like when did I start really unpacking things? I think consciously just on this subject of culture and people and somehow getting into these conversations with people who would talk to me as if I didn't have like tan skin and I wasn't born in a different country. It really made me think about like how do people see me and how do I see myself and how come people keep talking to me as if I am not how I look. And so I started like slowly unpacking like just my being, my existence, and then just having some conversations about my outlook and my experience as a Colombian woman and um kind of getting some like funny looks or like just different responses of like kind of realizing for people who I was talking to like, oh, you think differently or your experience was not like mine, and most of those people, like I said, were relatives, so white, like my adoptive parents. And so I kind of had to like sit in a little bit of tension, and that felt terrifying because I mean even thinking about it now is a little bit nerve-wracking because it feels like, oh, there's like a slight conflict here, or we're not on the same page. And am I going to lose you? Like, am I going to lose this person I'm talking to, this friend, or maybe like this relative who's realizing I think differently or I've experienced differently. And so, um, that it was like a slow thing getting into processing some of what I've experienced and not even I think one time I just simply thought, maybe I have more to look into with my adoption, just maybe. And I think I Googled like adoption groups. And then it was a bunch of adoptive parenting like support groups. And then I had to Google like, okay, that's not it. Let me like put in adoptees. Like that sounds like it would be a name. And so I put in adoptee support groups and then I started seeing more things. And then I think finally I came across Sarah Easterly's writing group, Adoptee Voices. And it was actually around the same time. Um, it was I got a little bit ahead of myself, but it was I think like a year after Will's father passed away, and his mother was kind of she was being cared for by his sister, and we were kind of talking about sharing that responsibility along with his brother. And so I'll let him share that part. But I remember thinking like there are spaces for people who are adopted like me. And so I started, looking into the writing group. And then I think I came across Haley Radke's podcast, Adoptees On. And those were some of the most like life-giving moments. And I actually remember I asked Will as his mom was about to move in with us, or maybe she had been for a little bit, like part-time with us. And I think I approached him saying, there's this writing group and it meets like once a week, but it's for like 3 hours because we write alongside each other and then we share. And I knew that our life was about to really get busy with part-time caring for his mom, but also I was pregnant with our third. And he, it was interesting. I'm trying to remember like your response, Will, but it was like, yeah. And so he was supporting me, but he was still kind of like, what is this? Like, I support you, but also if, this is something that you want to do, but I I think it was just like this calm before the storm of like unpacking all these things. And so I tried to log onto like Eventbrite, I think is how I used to register. And there was some kind of glitch. And I go downstairs to our basement, which was where his office was. And I'm saying, Will, because whenever I have technical issues, I go to Will because who else do I go to? And so I go down to Will and I'm like, I can't register and I don't think it's full. And I'm freaking out. Like, I just had this really cool opportunity and it's like being taken away from me. And so he's like on it. He emails Sarah at one point. I think he's like trying to get it on his work computer. And to make a long story short, I got into the writing group and I've been doing that ever since then. So it's like like 3 years now. And so obviously connecting with more adoptees, and I could talk about that more. I could talk about that for a long time. But the main point is I didn't even know there was a space. And there's these, like how Stewart said, like these God shots of meeting me where I am, because I always thought these adoption issues or effects of like on my life were kind of for me to deal with. And like God was just kind of like, you'll figure it out. And it wasn't. And there's so many things that I can even speak to more than that. But it was just this community existing at all is answered prayers that I didn't even pray for because I didn't know the words for it, but it is a tremendous blessing. And um in addition to having a spouse who's so supportive and other people in my life who are very supportive, but Will's support is really, especially in a time like we were in, just suffering, his father's loss, caring for his mom. um it was just an unthinkable thing, I think, but because he knew it was important to me, he was so on board, and it meant so much.
When you realize that there's other people out there that are feeling the same things as you, there's so many things that you don't have to say, but we just get, and it just makes
Mhm.
sense. And it was such a revelation. It was like it right, both.
But
But just to have these real leaders like
for
Haley
sure.
Radke and Sarah Easterly, like just forging this path for us so that we could like, and they're just like, come
Hmm.
along, like we can do this together. And I'm so thankful for people like her that have just led the
Hmm.
charge in this. um
And the world's gotten so much smaller for you as well. I'm just like thankfully to the internet and the podcast that Haley does and Sarah and Louise do. I can remember Kristal a number of years ago finding an adoptees group, because it's only been the last few years for Kristal as well.
since
Her realizing, oh
2000
my,
2021.
yeah,
Yeah.
like oh my gosh, there's other people out here. So going through the same sort of experience and it wasn't really I think it was some books at first, and then she got connected with a group, and she, we live in a smaller city in Canada, and trying to start a group as well, and it was like just Kristal and one person sitting around
talking about it being
talking
adopted.
about being adopted. So it was just like
Love that.
yeah, having the groups, and it wasn't, and I know I spoke about this in our last podcast, but it was just so amazing to watch you in California at that first conference and just be in a room with like 60 or 70 other people that were adopted, and she had never been in a room with like 3 people that were adopted at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, so moving.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, big for you. So, and this series was kind of birthed out of a need that you expressed to both Kristal and I in DC, Marisol, at that adoptee event. A need for support, to talk about the support that adoptees have in partners and whatnot. And what was sort of your thought process behind that?
So to answer that, I also have to say a thank you to you and Kristal, because when I went to that the Making of Me podcast event in DC with a friend, it was the first time I was in person with more than, one adoptee, because I had met this friend. And so we were just in awe of, firstly, your documentary and um, the relationship that you and Kristal have. And so that stood out to me the most, is the evidence of support. The second thing that stood out was, not only are you and have been supportive of Kristal for all these years and all of these um, big moments in her life, and having documented it, and then traveling with her to talk about all that documenting. Um, at the end of her screening that Friday night, I'm not going to do justice to the words that you gave, Stewart, but you addressed all the adoptees in the room. And what was interesting is, like, that, I was emotional during Kristal's documentary, but that was even more emotional for me, because I think this is so beautiful that Kristal's husband, like, stuck by, as a husband, as a father, and then as someone who can support her in helping other adoptees feel seen, and just to kind of like set this example of what this healthy, really like selfless relationship looks like. And so when I approached you, it was, I know that I like thanked you and just thought, like, those words that you said to all of adoptees, like, just encouraging us, was even the bigger picture, because obviously you're supporting, Kristal on a daily basis, and you're there for her for all those highs and those lows and those ideas that she has, and running with it. But to see all of those people like us in the room, and some of them had their spouses, some of them had like their adult kids with them, just really meant a lot to me. And so I kind of was thinking, like, how how interesting it would be to talk relationship with two people like yourselves. And I feel like I have tons of questions for you. But just like seeing, like, how, just being more aware, obviously, of the things that I've gone through, how does that like pan out with my relationship with Will? And so I was just so curious, and how that might look to other adoptees. And like I said, just that illustration of what you guys had in the documentary, and afterwards, and even now, and as I listen to you guys, I just felt like a need to talk about it.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of something that I needed to hear. So thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, at
Mm-hmm.
this point in my life today. So I appreciate it.
Hmm.
Go ahead, Kristal.
Yeah, I mean, I think optically people just see, you know, they see what we put out there, they see what we put out on social media. They see what we shared in the film, and there's so much behind the scenes. Like, they don't see those hours and hours of conversation where Stewart's sitting there letting me hash out my thoughts and feelings about who even am I? Who do I want to be? Who, like, what what place do I want to have in this world? Like there's so much behind the scenes. And then not just that, but those moments where I want to push him away, or I have those abandonment, you know, wounds coming up, and I'm freaking out and treating him like garbage because it's just this, response that I'm having to trauma that I suffered years and years and years ago. And the patience and the grace that is required to support an adoptee in a healthy way is, I don't think that it's talked about enough. So
I agree.
So
Yeah.
thank you for your words, for your kindness, for seeing us, for seeing Stewart. I think,
Oh yeah.
he likes to be behind the scenes, but he's also a words of affirmation guy. So I know you touched his heart. You touched his heart today.
I think too, from the perspective on this side, it's also like, though it's very challenging to hear, and so a lot of the things that come out of like my wife's mouth initially, it's less so now, but during like the thick of it, there were times I was like, how can you say that? And then, I honestly think it's like, I think God just gives patience and grace to hear. And then so quickly after my thought of like, how can you say that? It turns into, how is nobody else seeing this? And so I think
Yes.
just
Sorry.
being like, I'm profoundly impacted. I'm sure it's the same for Stewart. I'm sure it's the same for so many people who are on the spouse side, or, close relationship, but who are not adoptees. And I'm grateful too, because I feel like I see things in the way that they actually are, and not according to, a narrative that's pushed or something. And because of that, I see my wife more clearly for who she is. And so my love is deeper, my love is more genuine, and it's not easy, but it's authentic. And, so I'm appreciative of that from this side.
Oh my gosh, that's so meaningful to hear as an adoptee as well. Tell me what one of those things were that that she said that you were like, how could you say that?
Oh man. Okay, I'll share this one. This might not be the most like shocking one, because I'm terrible at remembering things on the spot. But there was one day where, like, sorry, I hope it's okay that I share this, but
Do it.
she was being mean, right? Like, she was being mean to me. She was being mean to the kids, and I'm just like, what the heck is going on? And she disappeared for a while around, I think it was right as I was tucking the kids in. And, she had kind of just like quick said goodnight and like disappeared. Right. And, I'm like, okay, something, there's something going on. So after I tucked the kids in, I went into our bedroom, and there she was in pitch black, just laying in bed. And she was sobbing. And I'll probably get emotional saying this, but she was sobbing. And so I went and I sat next to her, and I was rubbing her back, and I said, like, what's going on? And she just said, like, how can growing up in poverty be worse than this? And it was so hard for me to hear, because like, I'm looking at our life, right? And what we've been through, how strong our relationship is, the 3 beautiful kids that we have. We live in a nice house in a great neighborhood. I have a great job. Like, we have so much to be grateful for. And my wife is basically saying, in that moment, because of the strong emotion she's feeling, it would have been better if I grew up in this, let's say just in poverty in Colombia with my birth family and wasn't experiencing any of this trauma of adoption, than it is for me to be laying down in my warm bed with my kids healthy and safe in the next room over because of the pain that I'm feeling. And I'm sitting there hearing this and it's cutting me very deeply. Like, how can you say that? Right? Like you were brought out of this, potential future where you've got nothing and you're hungry and whatever it is. It could be one of a number of things, but you're not. And it was like one of those instances where it turns to a realization that this is just how painful this trauma can be. And yeah, shocking to hear, but really profoundly impactful because now I understand her that much more deeply.
That's something that I still struggle with Kristal's trauma and the upbringing that she potentially would have had if she was, stayed with her first mom. And I'm having a hard time even talking about that, my feelings with that right now, because it's something I don't think you've ever said that specifically, but like we've felt that.
Yeah.
How could just like the pain, everything that you guys are, have been through and the trauma, but we're still kind of rationalizing like, no, this is still better. It's still better that we're over here. And it's just like, no, why am I feeling like this though? Right. So,
And I think I'm like, for listeners, I'm over here sobbing. Like tears are rolling down my face right now. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the pain. And the pain can come out of nowhere. There's no rhyme or reason for it. You can be having a perfectly good day and then it'll just hit you and you'll be feeling it, and really it seems as though why am I feeling so terrible right now? And I really do believe that it goes back to that loss. It's so real. You just like, oh my gosh.
So for you, Will, what did the next couple hours look like for you being there and supporting Marisol through that and through those feelings?
Yeah, I think it's just an awareness that, though she might say something that hurts me, she's not intending to hurt me, but she's just being very authentic. And so just understanding that, putting yourself second in a situation like that. And then, I remember just asking questions, right? Because this is she's processing a trauma and it's never going to be comfortable or easy to do that. We're never going to get to a place where, I make you a cup of tea and it turns to a smile and we laugh our way through the pain, so to speak. I mean, so I think it's like, hey, we're here. We're processing this. I'm not going to leave you alone to do it because I love you. Let's do it. It's going to hurt. But just asking questions. And, that brings up sometimes more, feelings of being uncomfortable or cut in certain ways. But for me, it's like, I got to put myself second here because my wife is going through something that happened to her and has been her entire life's reality. And that all of that is culminating on this journey that she's on now.
It's so wise and, checking, and it's tough for men, I think, especially to do a lot of the time is check our egos and just,
because you're like, look at, being he's the breadwinner and I'm the stay-at-home mom. And, it's like, I think for him, he's like, well, look at everything that I've given this family. Look at all the sacrifices I've made for this family.
Right.
And you still can't be grateful. or you still can't, like, it's not enough. But it's not that at all. It has nothing to do with that. It's just that that is not the remedy to the pain.
Right.
And
Yeah, I think that was a big thing for me a long time ago. And I feel like Will's feeling the same way, as just realizing it's bigger. The pain is bigger than me, bigger than, it's not personal. It's not anything that, that I did directly, that you've got a lot of stuff going on, and yeah.
For me, it became pretty quickly apparent that, like, how can I have the answer to this? I don't, right? I don't share that same experience. And, I think in that case, like, my ears are more important than my mouth, because I really don't have answers to speak, but I can listen.
so I want to get to, you wanted to talk about what motherhood looked like for you. And I was actually just sharing my story last night at a treatment center, and I was reminded of how motherhood triggered my adoption trauma so severely that I suffered with terrible, terrible postpartum depression, and it got worse with either every child. And I never connected it to adoption or relinquishment. I don't know if that's your story. I was just sharing that it was something that I was reminded of. So if you can, just what was your experience of coming into motherhood?
Yeah, so we had our first daughter, Naomi, in 2016. I almost forgot. She'll be 9 actually soon. And so when I think back, firstly, that, as far as just the unknown of being pregnant and like making sure the baby's healthy and that you're healthy, like obviously that is what most mothers feel as far as like an anxiety or a worry. But I remember I was teaching at the time. And so I was pregnant and just on the move. And then I would like feel Naomi in my belly and like feel her movement and just really like embrace that. And, my mom had passed all away already. So it's not like I could really go to someone to share that. Obviously, I know that, she carried her son for a little bit. And so as far as like sharing with anyone, like I didn't have that. So I just kind of kept it to myself and just, I'm sure I shared, with Will, like, this is really cool and I can feel her. And we, had all of those like soon to be parent moments as far as feel her right here. She's right here. No, now she's over here and like feel my belly and all of that. So it like slowly was, I think, unraveling some more things to process as an adoptee, but I had no clue. Like I just remember thinking like, in the back of my mind, this is gonna be it. Like, this is gonna be where I really belong, is like having a kid of my own. And, I have my husband, we have a house, we've got like some friends, and this gonna be it. And I never really vocalized that because it sounds a little crazy. But I remember
It
thinking
doesn't
like,
sound crazy to me at all. It sounds very familiar to me.
yes. Yeah, and just thinking like I'm gonna hold her. Like I remember like being so excited to hold her and obviously totally terrified of the child rearing process and delivery, but still thinking like it's gonna pan out so well. And so I remember I mean, that whole story, like, is a whole story in itself, but I remember cutting to, like, when Naomi was about, goodness, like 2 or 3 months old, and so, we're getting through all of, like, night feedings and, like, nursing and all of that stuff, and I was, like, holding her, and I think Will, he was, working night shift at his, then job at 3 Mile Island for a little bit. And it was just she and I was holding her, and I had this thought. I was looking down, and it was just her and I in her nursery, and I thought, even if you didn't come from me, like, I would have loved you anyway. Because I think, like, as she was in my womb, and, like, God was creating her, I thought, like, "Oh, I'm gonna, like, it's gonna be like a unreal love." And I just had this, like, fantasy of, like, how it would be. And I looked at her, and I don't know why I said that to myself. I don't know why I thought that. I don't know if it was just me kind of getting over that, like, primal wound of just saying, like, "See, it's all nice," and, I don't know what I was unpacking there, but I remember looking down at her and saying, like, "Man, no matter what, you are just like this little gift." Um, but I'm not gonna lie, like, it was really hard to adjust to obviously a newborn. We didn't really have support. I mean, at all. I don't, that's not to say like people didn't come and see us and we didn't have, friends in the area. It was just not your typical, like, oh, like my mom was by my side when I was delivering, or people were waiting in the waiting room until they, were able to see her for the first time. It was just like this kind of thing we like didn't even think about. It was just the two of us. I labored with her, I had a C-section, and so that recovery was like wild. And so the initial like experience of having a baby was just intense to begin with. And so as she became a toddler and, had a personality, I remember thinking, like, she's like not obeying me, and there must be something wrong because this little child is like testing me. And I remember thinking, like, there's something wrong with me or our connection. And it brought out like so much rage in me, and thinking, like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And maybe it's just because I'm not great with kids, or maybe it's because I can't, like, I just sometimes still I have this feeling of, like, it's almost like in the middle of the night you're searching for your phone, like, I feel it, but, like, I don't know where it is, it's pitch dark, um, and you're just, like, searching for something, and I kind of align that to how I sort of feel. And initially, when I started having children with Will, like, I'm, like, grasping for this connection, and I don't know where, like, that emptiness comes from, other than, obviously just being inconvenienced with like a toddler tantrum is something all parents go through. But I know that it had to do, as I began the process a little bit here and there, like, it had to do with the lack of connection I had with my birth mother. And so, I mean, that took a while for even me to see, but looking back, I can see, like, I I wanna say I had postpartum depression, but I don't know if I would ever know, because what if it was just this unpacking of that primal wound, of that relinquishment of, I mean, I have no idea where I was from, like, being out of the womb until 3 months old, so there's just this subconscious lacking that comes out in ways that are just like, you know, there's a shame, because I feel like, okay, I don't feel this like closeness at times with some of my kids, or when they're babies mostly. And then I also feel like, well, why don't you? And like, that's your daughter, that's your other daughter, that's your son. Like, what is that disconnect? And so I still kind of struggle with that a little bit, but at least I'm a little bit aware. Um, and like can kind of pause, and I I actually like really look at them sometimes when I feel like this disconnection, and I look at them, and like I like take them by the shoulders, and I just like gently just look into their eyes to know, like, oh my gosh, you're like of me and of the person I love. And I have to like it like snap out of it a little bit, because I think I can disassociate so much. Like, if they're having big feelings, or the opposite, I share those feelings with them, and we're like going back and forth, because, I've got a 2-year old, a 5-year old, and an almost 9-year old, and they all have these different feelings, and they're all so dramatic. And like, I either share and like partake in that, or I am just looking at them like, I like see you and I want to, I want to be your mom and I am your mom and like you were mine. And I have to like really slow down sometimes when I sense that it's the lack of connection with them in that moment. And it takes so much work and slowing down to do that.
You just put words to what I have experienced in my own parenting experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing this. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would detach even
Yeah.
out of a fear of being connected to them
Yeah.
because that felt scary.
Did you this is making me think as well. Um, when you looked at Peyton when she was a baby, was that like a big thing for you to like see the same sort of features looking back at you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and like and then when when Evie was born and she looked just like me, that was and that's still like that's biology is a trip. Like it is it's
It's true.
wild, and now I have like my kids are 15, 16 and 18 our kids. They're not just mine. They're ours. um it's a wild thing because I think part of what can trigger me as a mother is seeing myself in them
Oh, yeah.
and seeing myself reflected back as a mirror. And I have this theory that I think that there's things that I would never have faced or dealt with had I not become a mother.
Right.
And the depths of emotion that motherhood can take you to. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
rage. Can you talk a little
Mm-hmm.
bit about that? Because I
Mm-hmm.
100% have had some rage that I've had to work through.
Yes. So the first thing that comes to mind as far as whenever I think like, why do I feel this? Why do I have this anger or this rage or like just this feeling that I want to jump out of my body, really? Um, I think as I'm unpacking, like sort of pretty recently is like the lack of control. And what I mean is, if let's just say, okay, so I homeschool my kids and at least my two older girls and Andrew's just kind of there for the ride. But I in everyday things, whether it's getting ready, we've got to go somewhere, or, just simply doing things with the kids, if things aren't like going the way that I've pictured or just how they're supposed to, like brushing your teeth. It's just a simple thing. I think that lack of control or my almost 9-year-old is getting pretty independent, which is a beautiful thing, but I've realized like I need to let her be independent and um when she articulates just different ideas for let's just say even just a simple innocent thing as far as where her school day is going to go or like um ideas she has about what she's going to do in her free time at the moment or just even like her just kid like nature. um I have if it's different, I can't really articulate it well, so I hope I'm it's sounding making sense, but just this lack of control, I think usually is the root of like this rage that I've had before. I'll Will's laughing because I'm an only child and like when Rachel, my second daughter was I don't know, like walking or something, maybe like 2 and Naomi would have been 5 when they started fighting, and it was during COVID, so, we're all getting on each other's nerves. But when they started fighting, I remember looking at him like, this is not okay. Like, my heart cannot take this conflict. It also has a little bit to do with how I was raised. Like, when I saw conflict, it triggered me. So I always just had to avoid it. And so when I saw them fighting, like, I had to defer to Will eventually because I think I was trying to just like get through it. But I had to go to Will because obviously he's the youngest. He's got 2 siblings. And just normalizing and kind of even taking my adoption story or my trauma or my experience a little bit out of just the normal development of a 2 and 5-year-old. And so
Yeah.
part of those pieces of motherhood is obviously why we're all here, being supported by the spouse, by, just that insight of having siblings. I mean, you can speak to that, but that was a lot of things that triggered me. And then also, obviously, it came out as just anger.
Yeah, siblings fight, it's normal. But one, if I can weigh in to one thing that we had talked about that actually came up in a counseling session I had with a counselor after my father passed away. I was just trying to be proactive about like how to handle grief. And we got to talking about some other things and anger came up, right? And as I was explaining it to him, he said, because I grew up very different than my children are growing up now. Very, very different. Same with my wife. And he summed it up and he said, as I was explaining to him that I grew up differently and I don't know how to handle this and it upsets me, he said, yeah. He goes, you're jealous of your kids. And that was profound because I didn't have a lot growing up. My siblings and I grew up, without much money and, Christmases without gifts and like stuff like that, right? And that's never the case. Like we take our kids on trips. Our kids always have more than, what they need and things like that. And he just called me out. He was like, and he said, it's not uncommon, but he said, you're jealous of your children. And Marisol resonated with that as well, because these kids know where they come from. They don't have to wrestle with those identity issues. And it's hard to see that when you grew up as an adoptee, just in your context, right?
Yeah.
To look at them and be jealous of the fact that you came from your mom and dad. You know who they are. You're with them every day. You know your siblings, right? You're deeply connected to them.
Right.
You know that they exist, something that you don't know, right? And I think it weirdly comes down to jealousy sometimes too.
So it's because I think maybe for some people listening, they might think, well, how could a grown man be jealous of his children, right? But, and I don't know if the two of you are familiar with internal family systems work and the parts work.
Nope.
So it's the concept is that we have many parts within ourselves, and so what I would say that jealousy, the way that I see it, is that jealousy is not coming from you as like a grown man. It's the little boy inside of you that never got those things, feeling that jealousy towards your children who are getting those things. Like and I think that's Stewart and I have been doing I've been doing this kind of work for several years, and he's just started to sort of get into it. And I think part of his process has been so profound is that like he's learning how to connect with those younger parts of himself that didn't get their needs met. And he's able to face that part of himself with compassion and love. You shared, Marisol, about the loss of your mom and how incredibly painful that was. And I'm so sorry for your loss. First of all, I just want to acknowledge your mom and your dad as well. That's hard to not have either one of your parents. And then Will, what role has grief played in your life?
Yeah. We can just go right to my father. I mean, I lost a couple uncles and some grandparents prior to, and just kind of that baseline level of grief that fortunately in this world everyone's acclimated to death in some degree. So I'll introduce you to my dad very briefly. My dad was born in Jerusalem in 1946. He immigrated to the U.S. in 1969 to New York City, was a business owner, ended up having kids when he was a little bit older, like I said. So he met my mom in 1982 overseas. They got married, came to the States. My brother was born a couple years later. 5 years after that, my sister was born, and then I was born 2 years later. And so, he was just my whole life, like owning, he would own random businesses, gas station, at one instance, a pizza shop at another. And, but like kind of fell on hard times when I was young. And I think that kind of affected his demeanor. He was always very silly, could make anybody laugh, was always affectionate in the sense of like, I could always go and give him a hug and a kiss. But when it came to like processing the emotional stuff of life, he was a little bit withdrawn, a little absent, and, never felt like there was a checking up on. And I love my father and I have the utmost respect for him, but it's just kind of a reality of it. And so anyway, fast forward, I think it affected my teenage years, it affected my adult life, but it ended up making me very, very independent. And but yeah, as an adult, he was kind of hampered by his condition. He couldn't really travel much, definitely couldn't watch the kids, didn't feel comfortable with that. And so having that bout of COPD, and then he quit smoking, and he had this like tremendous recovery. It was amazing. There was like more joy. You could tell he wanted to, he's asking about the kids more. He was asking for us to bring him over. Just generally like felt very good, and it was like kind of a new, I think at one point I told Mary, I'm like, I feel like I have a new father. Like, this is awesome.
Yep.
And then tragically, like a few months after that, he was having like some coughing, and they did some imaging and they diagnosed him with small cell lung cancer, which is very aggressive. So 6 months after his diagnosis, we had lost him. And it was very complicated because my mother, my entire life has been battling up until that point and going forward a neurological condition that they could not diagnose. Until the point that she passed away, they still didn't know exactly what it was, but it was slowly over 3 decades stripping her ability to walk. She would have like issues caused by that with low blood pressure where she would faint regularly. We would have, she needed a lot of care. I'll just summarize it with that. So when my dad passed away, even up until when he was diagnosed and as his condition started worsening, he couldn't even really take care of my mom. So my sister was doing a lot of that, God bless her. And it was very, very difficult on her. But then when my dad passed away, it was like my sister had to process that grief. We were all processing the grief of my father, but she was still watching my mother and, caring for her in that house. And it just got to be so difficult. And we needed to relieve my sister of that burden because she had been in it for so long. My brother has a family. I've got a family. My sister has a boyfriend who we adore now. But so long story short, my brother and I said, we've got to relieve my sister. And my mom started living with my brother's family and my family. And again, like, if you've never had to care for someone, it was the hardest thing we've ever had to do.
Absolutely.
It taxes you in so many ways, and it's so emotionally difficult to watch the person who cared for you have to be cared for by you in like the most intimate of ways. So it was really a challenge. And what it did was it did not give space for us to process the loss of my father. So that was extremely difficult. And to add to that, and I know I'm a little disjointed with the timeline, but to add to that, 3 weeks before my dad passed away from small cell lung cancer, my mom was diagnosed with a really aggressive uterine cancer. So it was just an absolute whirlwind for a couple of years because, then having to care for my mom, and she was battling cancer. She was receiving chemo that just completely wiped her out. And it felt like what is going on? We were just the whole family taking punches at every turn. And then, we lose my dad and can't even process that because it's just go, go, go with mom. And she had, been with like no evidence of disease for a while after the chemo, but then we could tell she was getting worse. She couldn't eat. She was losing a ton of weight. She was weak. And on a scan, they found that her cancer had come back. This was sometime in the late spring of 2024. And by June, she was in hospice. By July, we had lost her. And So just a whirlwind of a couple years. I think it was, but it was less than 2 years apart that we lost both my parents, and um, just very complicated emotions to deal with. But what was, I think, the most challenging, and I think kind of interwoven with what we had just talked about with anger and rage and processing all of this in parenthood, is, my grief and my wife's grief as adults, like, you can recognize it and call it out for what it is and know it. With kids, they can't speak what they're feeling all the time. Yeah. And so what's been really challenging but really valuable is trying to understand when our kids are experiencing the grief of losing their grandparents, not having any grandparents. When we're out at a function with people and they're, acting in a way that's just, it's like, well, something's off. Like, that's not you. What's going on? And then you realize there's a grandparent playing with their kids over there, and there's another, or with their friends over there. And there's, another friend set of grandparents are playing with them over there. And then you realize they're really grieving not having their grandparents as much as we're grieving not having our parents. So it's pervasive. It just hits every aspect of family life. And, but I'll say again, like what we had talked about before, could I, of my own accord, have like done the things that I had to do to care for my mom? Again, the deepest, most vulnerable, intimate things that you have to do to care for someone who can't care for themselves anymore. Could I have done that on my own? No. I would have broken down. If it was just me and my selfish flesh, like, I would have turned to something else, or I would have run away. I would have, you know what I mean? And we really felt the peace of God, and we really felt just the Spirit giving us what we needed to go on. And looking back on it now, it's painful. There's times where, I'll have good days for a couple weeks in a row, and then I'll have a day where every corner I took, I'm reminded of one of them, and you're just emotional and whatever it is. But we can look back on it, as bitter of a time as it was, with just an awe in seeing what God had done in that situation, and having a peace and a hope that we'll see them again. And so yeah, it's a journey, it's a ride.
Wow, I'm so sorry for such loss in your life. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. Grief manifests itself differently in everybody. And so as the two of you processed and went through this grief, was it easy to grieve together? Was it something that you felt like you had to do independently? What was sort of the challenges and the wins of navigating through so much loss?
I'll start very briefly. I feel like we grieve well together, and I think it's, in the case of my parents, I mean, my wife was right there by my side doing the caretaking for my mother. In instances where I'm having to work or do whatever else. I mean, she's caring for my mom independently of me in a lot of cases, and so she understands that, and she sees that, and she developed a love for my parents that when they pass, like, she feels that grief as well. And then, on the flip side, I would say there's constantly times where my wife is telling me, like, I miss my mom, and whether it's like something is happening with the kids, like a good thing, and she just wants her to share in that, or like, hey man, this is just a really difficult day or week and I miss my mom. And like, for a while it was, well, let's come up with like a tangible way. Let's invite your aunt over, or let's do this or that or whatever. But like, that turned into, you know what, I miss your mom too. Like, I wish your mom was here too. And so I think we share in that grief pretty well. But
yeah, I think naturally, based on our experiences and just the vulnerability we've, had to have, it's not abnormal for us to hear one of us say, that made me think of my mom, or like, I'm thinking of my dad lately. Like, it's just not an uncommon thing for us. It's just, it flows. in a bittersweet way. Like I see it as, I can connect with Will better and recognize like, do when when you're like thinking of your dad, thinking of even grieving like who his dad could have been to him as, you know, a man mid-30s with little kids, who he could have been to our children, to even like our friends and like my relatives. There's just so many of the could haves. Like we even like grieve that a lot too because I mean, I lost my parents, both of them, by the time I was 22, and then he was mid-30s for his. And so we like recognize that too. And I think although that's really hard to get out sometimes, as far as like just saying around this house, it's just like I wish they could pop over and say hi or something like that. And recognizing that it is going to be lifelong. And I mean, sometimes we just have to sit in the like, there's nothing to really do about it. Like, just sitting together. And yeah, I remember when Will one day when I said I missed my mom, one of the first times he said like me too, I remember thinking like, "Oh, like yeah, you too would have been something else. Like you are lacking this mother-in-law that could have, taken you under her wing and just had a different vantage point than obviously your own mother, but still just in addition to your parents or in addition to your other relatives, and like just acknowledging both of those, like all four losses, um has been really healing. And that's hard because you have to talk about it, but it also kind of reframes us in case anything were to come up with our kids, because they're vocal too. When when it's in the forefront of their brain, they'll just kind of say it like, so Teta is grandmother in Arabic, so they'll say, I miss Teta. And we kind of have to just, we meet them where they are. And then there's a lot of things that just as we can notice, like as time goes on, I think that at least one of our children probably won't remember his father. So their Cedo, their grandfather. And so like that's even opening up as of recently, like these things, these other little wounds that kind of come with it, with time and with grief and just memories that are fading. But, you know, all that to say, as a couple, it's just acknowledging and sitting with each other in this.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you know, or I know you've seen Kristal's documentary, and her mom passed away in
2021.
2021, but my mom had just passed away in 2020, unexpectedly. So it was something that just the both of us went through together, and we kind of grieved losing both our moms together and navigating that as families. And we still have both our fathers, thankfully. My
Mm-hmm.
dad works with me, and I see and talk to him almost every single day, and my brother works for me, and I see and talk to him every single day. Um, but like our moms were a huge part of our families, and it was huge loss. Um, and it was, yeah, just yesterday I was looking through some photos and on my phone for another, and I saw my mom, and I had said to a few of my employees like, I miss my mom.
Yeah.
And if your mom's still alive, make sure you tell them that you love them today.
It was interesting with grief. I really felt like the grief, although we lifted each other up and supported each other in it, and we were going through it together, I really felt like the grief was a lonely road for me. I wanted to like heal from it, just like I heal from every other little thing that I've
Yeah.
gone to therapy for. Like, oh,
Right.
okay, now I've dealt with this thing, and I can move on to the next thing. And it
Yeah.
just wasn't like that. And my therapist was reminding me like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you're just grieving, and it's a process, and it's going to take time. And I think since then I've realized that it's just like anything, you sort of try and work through, right? Something else will come up in life, and then you're going to deal with it in a deeper level. Like the grief may come up at a new depth that then, okay, I got to work through this. Like, I think as the kids have come into being teenagers, I wish so badly that my mom was still alive, because I feel like I have a new respect for her and a new appreciation for what she went through raising three teenagers herself, and like the hell I put, her through. And I feel like we would have a different relationship than we did when the kids were just little, because I think I was still trying to parent from a place of like, well, you didn't do an excellent job with me. So, like, I'm doing things this way. And if you want to be in our life, you need to, like, follow suit, kind of thing.
Yeah, still a place of judgment and
Yeah, lots of judgment. I just feel like I would have had a different relationship with her today if she was alive, because I just, it is hard parenting through the teenage years. Like, it really is. I mean, every stage has its challenges, and like there's wonderful things about the teenage years as well.
the fact that we're in this room for multiple hours and
Doing a podcast, and
they're
like,
okay.
right, they're fine.
They're
They're going to
fine.
be fed and like all of those things, right? So I want to ask you both something. What my experience has been with grief is that it's revealed new perspectives in my life as I've worked through this grief of losing Stewart's mother and then my mother. Is there a new perspective that your grief sort of revealed to the two of you?
Yes. It's interesting for me because I don't think I realized that perspective quite like right away. I lost my mom when I was kind of in this stage of just forming my own sense of self, young 20s. But I will say that after, not maybe not after, because, I think it also comes up sometimes like there's that component of maybe like bitterness, like we touched on jealousy before, but like having that mother like figure um was always something that like I longed for, but I didn't. And so I think when we first got married, I like wanted, I remember thinking like in my heart, especially becoming a mom, I remember thinking like, I gotta find someone to like mentor me or something. And I have really close friends who are in, a different season, they're empty nesters. And I glean from like their insight, their wisdom. I mean, even just talking to you guys now about teenage years, like I love learning. I love listening to those next things. So my perspective was to kind of like really idealize that and make it like my priority, like I need someone to pour into me, um and like I like put a lot of stock in that. And so the perspective that I'm gaining though as I look into more of just this mindset of my adoption story, the subject of my adoptive mom comes up because, I shared how open she was, how selfless she was, how understanding she was. And I think about, when the topic of reunion or contact or going to my birth country of Colombia comes up, I couldn't pinpoint where the feeling was coming from as far as the sadness or the reluctancy to, get into any of those topics. Um, and I realized that it was because I wanted my adoptive mom to walk, like physically walk that with me. I hadn't, I went through the beginnings of motherhood without her, and I knew that ache was there. But I realized, oh my gosh, my mom was so and could have been so valuable because of her character, because she was so comforting, so understanding, and could really be a listening ear to anyone. But I think especially me, whether I came into contact with birth family or biological family, or I, stepped foot back into Colombia 30 some years later, I like wanted her and I still want her by my side. So I actually had to like mourn again, like recently. And so my new perspective is kind of like I can take her with me in different ways and just acknowledging, firstly, that I did have that really unique, I think, in some ways, experience as an adoptee, having an adoptive mother like that when I was younger. And then, you know, seeing too that I do have the support such as Will and, friends who know that I would like to do some of these different things as far as my adoption journey. So the perspective would be that, I used to really want to fill this void of her. And right now, although I would long for that, it's on this side of heaven just not realistic. And so, how can I create ways to establish her memory? How can I share who she was with my children, with my friends, and keep the conversation about her alive as opposed to trying to fit all of these maybe mother like figure women in my life, or, that person maybe even alluding to my birth mother at some point. Like I want to preserve my mother, Sue, my adoptive mom. And I think that's healthy because to separate that instead of searching and grasping for just something that like she's irreplaceable. Yeah. So that's my perspective lately.
I'll be brief. I think for me, it's just like death provides such a finality for the people around you. And so, when I think of like what reminds me of my mom and dad, well, at some point in the future, and God willing, it's far in the future, my kids are going to have things that remind them of me. And, same with my wife, if I outlive her or the people around me, whatever it is. And so like, what do you want people, what, what things do you want people to remember you by? Like what is going to trigger that in them? I think has been a lot more at the forefront of my mind. And it causes me to I'm not perfect at this, but I'm trying to not be so reactionary because like there's a lot at stake, right? And it just reminds you of that when you go through that grief, that those same things you're feeling about the person you lost, somebody else is going to feel about you when you go. And like you kind of have some say in that while you're still here.
Well said.
Yeah, that was the things being so final. That was a tough realization for me, and something that I hadn't thought about before, but till my mom passed away, and it was just like, and yes, I had some uncles and some grandparents and stuff like that that had passed away, but it was never really, we had moved away, and they weren't a huge part of my life, and so it wasn't so impactful. But then when my mom passed away, it was just like no matter what I did, and I'm somebody who takes care of things, I fix things, no matter what I did or how hard I tried, it was never going to be the same. She was never coming back. That was a big realization, tough pill to swallow. So can totally relate there.
Marisol, in your Are You Adopted clip that you did for me in DC, thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
I hadn't, I sort of put these out slowly over time, and you said something in there that really I haven't been able to stop thinking about. And you talked about, your adoptive mom passing away and not being able to see her physical features in your children. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, of course. It's interesting that came up. I think that's something I've been realizing, and it's because when Will's parents passed away, I think in my own mourning of them and who they were to me and who they were to my children, and as my kids were, getting rid of the like little kid facial expressions and like just like little baby fat, I could see his parents in them and I pointed it out. And I'm looking at them like, oh my gosh, I see your mom and, whoever. And then I realized, like, oh, I don't have that. And so that is, another wave of this life journey of grief and the adoptee experience in general. But yeah, that's something that's been really heavy for me lately. And just, you know, it's like I said in that short clip, is like the both and, like, I love seeing myself and my kids. I think it's just a unique thing for an adopted person. But then also I want to see a little glimmer of my mom, and I can't. Now, I will say that she has 5 siblings, and so it's really special when I get together with them, because I can see the quirks of her. And same thing for my dad. I can see, like, the way they speak with, like, the Philly, South Jersey accent. I can hear them, or I can hear him. And so those things I have to hold tightly when they happen. But yeah, as far as an adopted person, it is another component of the loss that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that I never really thought about with you, that you don't get to see your mom in anybody.
Mm.
That's your aunts, but they can
Yeah.
be frustrating at times. So whereas me, I don't know if you know this, Kristal was a hairdresser at one time, and once in a while I don't want to get my hands sticky or whatever, and she'll comb my hair for me, and she was wanting me to grow my hair longer like a few months ago, and she combed it,
Mhm.
and she combed it just like she used to comb my mom's hair. And I'm just like, I look like my mom right now. Like, what are you doing? I'm not a 70-year-old lady. Like, who am I? She like back combed it all. It was a lot longer than this. Back combed it all, and like, no, I'm not wearing this out of the house.
But I did used to do his mom's hair, and he has the same hair as his mom, and it's so, yeah, it's so wonderful to to see your mom's hair in your hair, even when I touch it. Oh my gosh. Well, with that said, I want to thank you two so much for being with us today, for sharing so beautifully and eloquently, and the wisdom. You've just been a gift to us. So thank you so much. I'm going to go away from this conversation with a lot to think about because of you two.
We really appreciate it. You guys are, definitely. The conversation was great, and yeah, made us both think, and have given me some realization. So thank you.
We really appreciate you guys. You're both very special. Thank you.
Yes, this was just such a gift. It was lovely. I knew it would be. And yeah, it was just a pleasure to talk to you about so many different things. And
10 out
thank
of
you for
10.
listening.
10 out of 10 podcast.
Yes.
Well, thank you everybody for listening today to the Because She's Adopted podcast. Like and subscribe, drop us a rating, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Kristal Parke Official. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, Stewart.